Why do humans only see what's real when facing the end? Greetings, everyone. Today, I want to explore one of the most fundamental questions of human existence. Why do humans only see what's real when facing the end? This question may seem simple, but it implies the deep nature and complexity of human experience. Why do we only realize the true meaning and value of life when confronting limitations, deadlines, and death? Through this audiobook, we will delve deeply into the psychological, philosophical, and theological aspects of this phenomenon. Chapter 1. The essence revealed by the finiteness of time. Time is our most precious resource, yet also the one we waste most carelessly. How do we change when we suddenly realize its finiteness after living as though it were infinitely given? Heidegger defined humans as beings toward death. Humans are the only beings who are conscious of their death and live toward it. Ironically, we consciously avoid this fact in our daily lives. We treat death as if it's always someone else's business. When was the last time you seriously thought, "I will certainly and definitely die someday"? Most people probably deliberately avoid such thoughts. It's too uncomfortable a truth. Yet paradoxically, when we listen to testimonies of terminal patients, we find interesting commonalities. They say they've started to live a real life. The small joys of everyday life that they previously took for granted. Morning sunlight, conversations with family, the taste of favorite foods, suddenly become vivid. A terminal cancer patient I met once said, "Before my cancer diagnosis, I lived for 20 years in the future. Promotion, retirement, old age. But now that tomorrow isn't certain, I wonder if the fragrance of this cup of tea I'm drinking today has always been this deep." Human consciousness remarkably becomes clearer under the pressure of a deadline. In psychological experiments studying college students' assignment submission behavior, 90% answered that their concentration and creativity improve most right before the deadline. Somewhat cynically, we might be lazy beings who only come to our senses when the end approaches. The finiteness of time forces us to prioritize. If we had infinite time, wouldn't everything be equally important? But in limited time, we must choose what is truly important and what is merely urgent. In a famous psychological experiment, when participants were asked, "What would you do if you only had 1 year left to live?" Most gave answers very different from their current jobs or daily lives. What does this gap mean? Doesn't it show the discrepancy between the life we truly value and the life we actually live? Awareness of finiteness tears the veil of false desires. It liberates us from what sociologist Baudrillard called simulacra, desires for images without substance. Would someone facing death really want a more expensive car or a bigger house? They would probably focus on essential values like relationships, meaning, and peace. As the Ecclesiastes writer said, the realization that everything is meaningless paradoxically leads to discovering true value. The end strips away the shells of meaningless things and leaves only the core. Chapter 2. The transparency of being through the lens of death. Seneca said, "Learning to die is learning to live. Death is a teacher that teaches us how to live." According to anthropologists' research, all cultures have rituals and stories about death. This shows the powerful, universal influence of death on human consciousness. Egyptians viewed life as preparation for eternity, while Tibetan Buddhism emphasized through the concept of bardo that the process of dying is a process of facing truth. With advances in modern medicine, research on near-death experiences of people recovered from clinical death is flourishing. Interestingly, regardless of cultural or religious background, these experiences give similar testimonies. They say they intuitively understood the true meaning and impact of their actions and choices through experiencing their lives unfolding like a panorama. American clinical psychologist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, in studying terminal patients, analyzed the psychological stages experienced by people facing death. According to her research, patients who reach the stage of acceptance after initial denial, anger, and depression show remarkable serenity and clarity. They express their feelings without pretense, as if unmasked, clarify complex relationships simply, and find true priorities. Let me pose a somewhat cynical question here. Why do we gain such clarity only when facing death? Do we stop lying only when we no longer have time to deceive ourselves, after living in the spectre of self-deception all our lives? Is our self merely such a fragile illusion? Paradoxically, the shadow of death illuminates life more clearly. German philosopher Nietzsche said, "Every human should have their own death. Like their life, their death too belongs only to them." Death is a paradoxical point that reveals universal truth while being a thoroughly personal experience. This is also fascinating from a sociological perspective. Modern society hides death behind hospitals and nursing homes, selling myths of youth and eternal growth. But this concealment of death ironically steals the authenticity of life. A culture that denies death may not experience real life either. Psychologist Ernest Becker, in his book The Denial of Death, argued that most human civilization is an attempt to deny and transcend the fear of death. Honor, wealth, power, even religious beliefs are fundamentally part of a hero project to escape the fear of death. From this perspective, the moment of facing death is when all these defense mechanisms collapse. And beyond that collapsed wall lies truth. The illusion of a self that seemed eternal breaks, and naked existence is revealed. The Bible speaks very directly about this in Matthew 16:26. What good will it be for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? This verse sharply points out what true value is when seen through the lens of death. Chapter 3. Finding the beginning at the end. The psychology of change. From a psychological perspective, facing the end becomes a powerful catalyst for change. American psychologist William James said, "The deepest personal changes occur through the experience of death." Death here doesn't necessarily mean only physical death. It includes little deaths, such as the end of relationships, career endings, or even the collapse of strong beliefs. These psychological crises act as transformative experiences where existing identity collapses and a new self is reconstructed. Interestingly, trauma research discovers the phenomenon of post-traumatic growth. After serious crises or losses, many people discover stronger resilience, deeper relationships, greater appreciation, and new possibilities in life. Neuroscientific research confirms this phenomenon. The brain increases neuroplasticity in extreme stress situations, enhancing its ability to form new neural connections and restructure thought patterns. In other words, the experience of facing the end literally rewires our brains. This is not limited to the individual dimension. Historically, moments of civilizational crisis and collapse often coincide with the greatest innovations and Renaissance periods. The Renaissance after the 14th century Black Death, the scientific and technological revolution after 2 world wars, and increased global connectivity after the end of the Cold War are examples. Let's make a somewhat cynical observation here. Humanity seems to be a stubborn species that won't change until truly desperate. Perhaps we cling to the status quo until the very last moment, only spreading our wings when standing at the cliff's edge. Is this an adaptive mechanism from an evolutionary perspective, or just our laziness? Psychologist Carl Jung said, "New consciousness is born only through pain." The painfulness of facing the end is not simply a trial, but a necessary rite of passage for deep consciousness change. This perspective can also be found in the Bible. In John 12:24, "Very truly, I tell you, unless a kernel of wheat falls to the ground and dies, it remains only a single seed. But if it dies, it produces many seeds." The end is not a disconnection, but a necessary process for a new beginning. From this perspective, the reason humans see what's real when facing the end is clear. The end liberates us from existing patterns, illusions, and self-deception, opening new perspectives and possibilities. Chapter 4. The Philosophy of the End, at the Boundary of Existence and Transcendence. From a philosophical perspective, the concept of the end has occupied the core of human thought. Socrates said, "Philosophy is the practice of preparing for death," and existentialist philosophers saw the inevitability of death as the essential condition of human existence. Existentialist philosopher Albert Camus, in The Myth of Sisyphus, described human life as an absurd repetition, yet found the possibility of rebellious meaning creation in the recognition of the end. Living while knowing life is meaningless is true courage. Wittgenstein said in his Tractatus Logico-Philosophicus, "Death is not an event in life. Death is not experienced." From this perspective, death is the ultimate boundary we cannot directly experience, while simultaneously providing the frame that gives border to all experience. We come to view life through that frame. The concept of the end is also important in Eastern philosophy. In Buddhism, the concept of impermanence teaches that realizing everything changes and ends is central to enlightenment. Taoism views life and death as natural cycles, like the changing seasons. An interesting paradox emerges here. When we truly accept the existence of the end, we can paradoxically immerse ourselves more deeply in the present. The Japanese aesthetic concept of mono no aware emphasizes the poignancy and beauty arising from the transience of things. The reason cherry blossoms are beautiful is because they soon fall. Cherry blossoms that bloom eternally would lose their specialness. Let me cynically ask our modern selves, do we really want eternity? If you became an immortal being, what would you do during that endless time? In the movie Interstellar, Cooper says, "We humans aren't designed to handle infinite time. Finiteness may be both the constraint of our existence and the source of meaning." Philosopher Heidegger's concept of being in the world emphasizes that humans cannot be separated from their connection with the world. And one of the essential characteristics of this connection is finiteness. When we recognize the end, we begin to understand our true relationship with the world. The Bible expresses this more profoundly in Psalm 90, verse 12. "Teach us to number our days, that we may gain a heart of wisdom." Here, numbering our days means facing the finiteness of our time is the beginning of wisdom. Chapter 5. The Paradox of the End. Freedom given by limitation. Freedom and limitation may seem like opposing concepts, but paradoxically, freedom without limitations often leads to paralysis and emptiness. Psychologist Barry Schwartz, in his book The Paradox of Choice, revealed that too many choices actually make decisions difficult and lower satisfaction. In this context, recognizing the end paradoxically brings freedom. Instead of wandering in the chaos of infinite possibilities, we can focus on what truly matters. Writer Aldous Huxley said, "Experience is the art of choice." Our finite time forces choices, and through these choices, we create our own unique life story. Argentine writer Jorge Luis Borges' short story, The Library of Babel, describes the overwhelming confusion brought by infinite possibilities. In this story, a library with infinite books becomes not a paradise of knowledge but a place of chaos and despair. A world without limitations is rather a world where meaning is difficult to find. According to psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi's flow theory, we experience the greatest satisfaction and immersion in limited environments with clear goals and immediate feedback. In activities like Go, music performance, and writing, we actually exhibit greater creativity and freedom within limited rules. The same applies to life. Interestingly, medical staff working in terminal care often testify about the remarkable freedom and liberation terminal patients show. Having nothing more to lose, they freely express emotions and thoughts they previously dared not express. Poet Rilke said, "Each of us is surrounded by death, and within it, we must create life." Death's awareness frightens us, but simultaneously opens the possibility of true life. Let's pose a somewhat cynical question here. Many fears and anxieties we feel in life, fear of failure, anxiety about rejection, fear of uncertainty, are they fundamentally important? From death's perspective, how trivial these worries seem. I can die. Therefore, I am truly free. The Bible provides deeper insight into this paradoxical freedom in Matthew 16:25. For whoever wants to save their life will lose it, but whoever loses their life for me will find it. This is the paradoxical wisdom that one discovers true life when freed from self and attachment. Psychologist Ernest Becker pointed out that humans who cannot overcome fear of death fall into various false heroisms. Attempts to deny one's finiteness through power, fame, and wealth actually distort life's essence. In contrast, people who accept the reality of the end can live more truthfully, freed from these illusions. They are less concerned with others' evaluations, focus more on internal values than social status, and place more meaning in being than possessing. This is the paradox of the end. When we acknowledge the end, we actually become freer. Chapter 6. Ways of experiencing the end, cultural and social differences. Interestingly, how we experience and interpret the end varies greatly by culture and era. Anthropologist Felipe Arias, in his book The Hour of Our Death, traced how Western society's attitudes toward death have changed. In medieval times, death was an everyday and public event. People met death in their beds, surrounded by family and community. But in modern society, death has gradually become medicalized and concealed. Death is no longer a communal experience, but a personal event hidden behind hospital walls. Japanese culture celebrates the beauty of the end through the concept of mono no aware. This means the pathos and beauty that comes from the transience of things. The cherry blossom festival, Hanami, is considered most meaningful. Not when flowers are in full bloom, but when petals begin to fall. Tibet's Bardo Todol, or Tibetan Book of the Dead, presents the path to ultimate liberation through the process of death. For them, death is not a fearful end, but a stage in the journey toward enlightenment. Mexico's Day of the Dead is a festival honoring the deceased, viewing death not as fear, but as a continuation of life. Filled with colorful skull decorations, food, and music, this festival sublimates the fear of death into laughter. What can we learn from these cultural differences? Cynically speaking, has modern Western society lost the richness of life by denying death? We might be living in anxiety and emptiness, while acting as if we'll be young and healthy forever. Sociologist Jeffrey Gorer pointed out that death has become a pornographic taboo in modern society. Just as sexual culture was once taboo, death is now excluded from public discourse. We watch numerous murder scenes in movies, yet don't talk about the actual process of death and its meaning. The Bible in Ecclesiastes 7:1 delivers a direct message that transcends this cultural avoidance. The day of death is better than the day of birth, implying that facing the end is essential to understanding the beginning. Chapter 7. The End in the Digital Age. New Challenges and Possibilities. The development of modern digital technology has added a new dimension to the concept of end. Social media provides a kind of virtual immortality by permanently preserving our digital traces. Facebook's memorial account feature allows a user's digital identity to continue existing after death. The transhumanism movement dreams of infinite extension of human lifespan through technology, even digital immortality through mind uploading. Companies like Google's Calico project or Tesla's Elon Musk-supported Neuralink are redefining death itself as a technological problem that can be overcome. But such technological optimism raises serious philosophical and ethical questions. If we overcome death, would it still be us? Can digitized consciousness still be considered human consciousness? Cynically speaking, could a life without death be considered a human life? Interestingly, digital technology creates a new form of digital memento mori while denying the end. Smartphones' screen time feature coldly shows us how much limited time we're consuming. Social media timelines visualize how past moments pass by. Psychologists point out that such digital environments cause temporal compression. As we consume more information faster, we risk losing experiences of deep reflection and presence. Paradoxically, the infinite content provided by technology further disperses our finite attention. Philosopher Byung-Chul Han, in his book The Burnout Society, diagnoses modern humans as trapped in excessive positivity. We ignore life's rhythm and the inevitability of the end while constantly suffering from commands to do more, faster, and more efficiently. The Bible provides an antidote to this modern impatience in James 1:4. Let perseverance finish its work, so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Recognizing and accepting the end gives us the leisure and wisdom to live in the true present. Chapter 8. The End in Spiritual Dimension, Perspectives of Transcendence and Eternity. Religious and spiritual traditions offer unique perspectives on dealing with the end. Interestingly, most religions teach that physical death is not the complete end of existence. In Christianity, death is understood as a gateway to eternal life. Apostle Paul said in Philippians 1:21, "For to me, to live is Christ, and to die is gain." From this perspective, death is not the end, but a new beginning. In Buddhism, death is considered a stage of reincarnation. Death is not disconnection, but a form of change. Buddhism's concept of impermanence teaches that acknowledging everything changes and disappears is the way to escape suffering. Hinduism's Bhagavad Gita says, "The soul is never born nor dies. He who thinks the soul can be killed is in error. Death is merely the end of one chapter in the eternal Atman's journey." In Islam, the present world is understood as a preparation process for the afterlife. The Quran teaches, "Every soul shall taste death, and on the day of resurrection, your reward will be given to you in full." What is the common insight these religious perspectives suggest? It is that the end contains seeds of a new beginning, and finiteness can be a window to transcendental meaning. Taking a cynical approach, these religious perspectives might be seen as merely consolation stories, to soothe the fear of death. On the other hand, these transcendental perspectives can provide deep insights into life's true meaning and purpose. Philosopher Kierkegaard said, "Anxiety is the dizziness of freedom." The anxiety felt before the possibility of the end may not be simple fear, but the vertigo that comes from facing infinite possibilities and freedom of choice. The Bible presents this transcendental perspective more clearly in 1 John 2:17. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of God lives forever. By distinguishing between the temporary and the eternal, we can discern what is truly valuable. Chapter 9. Practical applications of insights through the end. So far, we've explored various aspects of how humans see what's real when facing the end. Now let's consider how these insights can be applied to everyday life. First, we can reinterpret the practice of memento mori, remember death, in a modern context. In ancient Roman times, generals kept a slave who whispered, "You too will die someday," during victory parades. This was to maintain humility and reality awareness, even at the peak of power and success. In a modern context, we can take 5 minutes every morning to meditate and recognize our finiteness. Just asking, "If today were the last day of my life, what would I do?" can clarify priorities. Second, we can write an end scenario. Renowned psychologist Jordan Peterson recommends writing a future autobiography in his self-development program. By writing from the perspective of looking back at the end of your life, you identify true values and choices without regret. Third, we can recover awareness of the end through digital detox. Modern technology robs us of space for deep reflection while providing constant stimulation and information flow. By regularly turning off digital devices and taking time for silence and solitude, we can more sensitively recognize the flow of time and finiteness. Fourth, we can rediscover the value of the present through a gratitude journal. According to Harvard University research, people who record things they're grateful for daily experience greater happiness and life satisfaction. Recognizing the preciousness of things taken for granted is another way of looking at life from the perspective of the end. Fifth, we can develop the habit of not postponing important conversations. Bronnie Ware, a palliative care nurse, reported that one of the most common regrets expressed by dying patients is not expressing sincere feelings to loved ones. It's never too late to tell loved ones today how precious they are. Sixth, experience purposeful failure. Failures and frustrations are small forms of endings. Through these experiences, we can recognize our limitations and learn humility and resilience. Deliberately stepping out of comfort zones to challenge ourselves can be not only an opportunity for growth, but also practice in seeing what's real through the end. The Bible summarizes this practical wisdom in Ephesians 5:15-16. Be very careful then how you live, not as unwise but as wise, making the most of every opportunity, because the days are evil. Recognizing the finiteness of time is the beginning of wise living. Chapter 10. Conclusion. Finding the beginning at the end. As we conclude our journey, let's return to the fundamental question. Why do humans only see what's real when facing the end? First, awareness of the end sharpens our attention. When a deadline approaches, our minds instinctively focus. The end clears away the fog of distraction and delay, returning our gaze to the present moment. Second, the end purifies our value system. When viewed from death's perspective, much social status and material success becomes diluted in meaning. Meanwhile, essential values like relationships, love, and meaningful contributions become clearer. Third, awareness of the end liberates us from self-deception and illusion. When we act as if we'll live forever, we become chained to unnecessary fears and attachments. But when accepting finiteness, we experience greater freedom and authenticity. Fourth, the end provides us with a transcendental perspective. All great spiritual traditions reveal deeper dimensions of our existence by distinguishing between the temporary and the eternal. Fifth, awareness of the end connects us more deeply with community. Death is a thoroughly personal experience, yet simultaneously the most universal human experience. The recognition that we all share the same fate enables deep empathy and solidarity. The Bible's wisdom summarizes all this in Mark 8:36-37. What good is it for someone to gain the whole world, yet forfeit their soul? Or what can anyone give in exchange for their soul? This verse clearly shows what true value is within our finite existence. We can either avoid awareness of the end in fear, or use it as a lens to experience life more fully. The choice is ours. Ancient Greek philosopher Epicurus said, "When death is there, we are not, and when we are there, death is not." This meant there's no need to fear death. But on a deeper level, it urges us to live the present fully. Recognizing the end is a way to experience the present more intensely. Knowing every moment is precious and finite awakens us, sharpens our senses, and opens our hearts. The Bible presents the ultimate purpose of this awakening in John 17:3. Now this is eternal life, that they know you, the only true God, and Jesus Christ, whom you have sent. Recognition of the end leads to recognition of the beginning. When we acknowledge our finiteness, we finally have an open heart toward the eternal. Ultimately, the reason humans see what's real when facing the end is simple. The end guides us from illusion to reality, from the superficial to the essential, from the temporary to the eternal. I hope the insights we've explored through this audiobook provide deep meaning and direction for your life. I encourage you not to avoid the end, but to use it as a lens to understand and experience life more deeply. Finally, I want to conclude our journey with this Bible verse. So we fix our eyes not on what is seen, but on what is unseen, since what is seen is temporary, but what is unseen is eternal. 2 Corinthians 4:18. Thank you sincerely for listening to the end. If this message has been helpful to you, please subscribe to my YouTube channel. I will share more profound insights and wisdom. May God's grace and peace be with you on your journey.